All right, I get it. Dating feels terrible. It feels impossible. And you feel like you're running into the same roadblocks over and over again because despite dating different people, the same stuff keeps happening to you. Like they ghost, or you have feelings and they don't, or you end up in situationships or with unavailable people, or things explode spectacularly at the 3-month mark and you're like, what am I doing wrong? I'm going to explain to you a framework that I have came up with based on my work with people and helping them get clear on dating. So this is going to be a really useful video if you feel like you know something's not quite going right, but you don't know how to explain it. I've developed a framework that I'm calling the 5 stages of dating, and that traces someone's journey as either a anxiously attached person or a fearful avoidant, which is sometimes called disorganized attachment. That journey from those insecure attachment styles to the earned secure attachment style. There is a free quiz linked in the description. It takes about 5 minutes and it'll tell you specifically which areas of dating that you may be experiencing some friction in. And it will also tell you the stage of dating I can kind of infer you're in based on your results. So let me explain this and who this is for. I'm specifically talking about people who deal with anxious attachment or disorganized attachment, which is also called fearful avoidance in some circumstances. So if your main pattern is dismissive avoidance, which means you primarily pull away or shut down or become uncomfortable with closeness at a certain point in the relationship, the stages I'm describing might feel less familiar to you because it's not made with you in mind. I'm thinking more about someone who has an either anxious attachment style or disorganized attachment that leans anxious. And if you want to understand attachment styles better, you should check out my video on the topic. It's super in depth. I spent so long on that video. It's very good. Link in the description and in the cards. Second, attachment styles are very well studied psychological theory. And I took those theories that some academic has actually written down and done studies on, and I applied that to my own lived experience and also to the experiences of the people I work with my dating coaching. So this is not backed up by years of academic research, and I'm not diagnosing you with anything. I feel like I need to be responsible in telling you that. I feel like a lot of people hear a label on the internet and they're like, oh my God, that's me and that's going to be me forever. No, I'm not even trying to give you a label. This is simply a tool for you to help you conceptualize a progression of how you can think about your current dating experience and what it actually looks like what the goal of becoming a secure dater looks like, because so many people don't even know what they're trying to accomplish. So I want you to pay particular attention to the progressions of each stage. Third, and this is important, these stages are not a ladder that you climb once and never come back down. Like, I do think about it as a progression, but you're also a human being. You're not a robot. There will be stretches of your life where you're in stage 1. Then there'll be moments where you're in stage 4, and then someone comes along and suddenly you're bumped down to stage 2. That's actually totally normal. It's also possible that you're in between stages. Like, a lot of the people I work with are in between stage 3 and 4. And like, they kind of go back and forth between those cluster of behaviors. So this framework is just a way for you to think about your patterns, and I don't want you to think of it as a rigid system, okay? This is just trying to illuminate some shadow work. All right, let's get into it. The underlying question. What all 5 stages have in common is one question that runs beneath the whole thing. And that question is, am I someone who gets chosen? And it seems like a very simple question, but we want to pull this apart a little bit. Every stage is just a different strategy that we may use in order to manage the anxiety that comes with that question. Some people stop trying to date so they never have to ask that question. They just think about dating a lot, they long for it, but they're not actually putting themselves out there. Some people are trying to audition their way into being chosen, and usually they end up dating either extremely unavailable people, so like married people, or very difficult people that don't want to give them the attention or the love and affection that they actually deserve. And so those folks are trying to outrun rejection, which is not possible. I think most of us know that logically, but they think that they can act a certain way and then be chosen. And similar to that, some people are stuck in what's called a healing fantasy. So those folks think that there is a fixed state that they can get to, and if they get there, then love is going to fall into place. Like they're just magically going to meet their person. And that's why I stopped doing manifestation content, because it was feeding into that healing fantasy. And I absolutely do not want to be responsible for that. At the core of all of this is that one question: am I good enough to be chosen? Am I worthy for love? Stage 1 is the hesitator. So the hesitator is not dating. They're on the bench. They have put themselves on the sideline. Now it can get confusing because they might be on the apps. They might even be swiping a little bit. They might start a few DM conversations. But when the chance comes up for them to actually meet up with someone and go on a date, they find a way out of it. And you know, when you match with someone and you make a plan to meet up and then out of nowhere they ghost you or they stop responding or they unmatch you, yeah, most of those people are probably hesitators. At this stage, the hesitator is trying to work up the courage to actually date, but they're not there yet. Like they're still really scared. And frequently the hesitator tells themselves that they're just not ready, or everyone else is the problem, or they're focusing on themselves, or they'll know the right person when they meet them. Like they have all of these excuses that sound really logical. And the feeling of preparedness, they think that it will magically overtake them upon some mythical experience or love at first sight or something like that. Like they keep pushing it back a little bit until it never really comes. And it may be true that their life isn't quite stable enough to bring in a partner or like to change it drastically, because frequently when you start to actively date, you have to go about changing your lifestyle so that you'll meet more people, because exposure is one of the biggest issues people have. But there is usually something else underneath that hesitation that goes beyond the practical stuff. And I talked about it in this video if you want to check that out. Usually what it is at some point, the hesitator drew a conclusion about themselves and they decided that somewhere deep down, they are not ready to date, or that if they try to date, it probably won't go anywhere. So they just shouldn't even bother. Like they're setting themselves up for failure if they even go out there, because they're not ready yet. There's this overwhelming desire to pre-reject themselves from even trying. And it's protective, because ultimately, there is a shame around connection for the hesitator. They fear people and they are really afraid of being hurt by someone else, but they still have that longing for connection. And if you have, disorganized attachment, fearful avoidance, this probably resonates with you quite a bit, like that fear of connection, but still wanting it. And the other thing is that they think about dating quite a bit, but the fear of being hurt overpowers that desire to date or that curiosity about dating. So like I said, this is a protective positioning. They want to manage the risk by opting out before they can find out the answer they're afraid of. And our brains are very good at choosing the comfort of certainty, even when that certainty is painful, like telling yourself you're going to be single forever. That still hurts, but it hurts less than the uncertainty. Like having to sit in the uncertainty of trying to date and being terrified and going on your first, like that's a horrible experience. Why? Like that sounds super overwhelming to a hesitator. What moves you out of that stage is taking the tiniest possible step into the process of dating. Just readiness doesn't come before you've tried. At least I've never seen anyone feel ready before they've tried, no matter what we're talking about. That feeling comes as you try. And it comes more incrementally than we might like to admit. Stage 2 is the auditioner. The auditioner is trying. They're going on dates. They're on the apps. They're putting themselves out there. And that takes a lot of courage. I want to acknowledge that. Going from hesitator to auditioner is really hard and it's scary. And they were able to get over that hump. But what's actually happening is usually they're not dating to find a connection. They're dating to be chosen, but they don't really realize that's what they're doing. Every single interaction is filtered through the question of, does this person like me? The auditioner is not asking themselves how they feel on the date. They're not asking if this person is compatible. They're worried about how they're coming across to this person. They're thinking about whether they're impressive, or if their date thinks they're being weird, or if they're being too much, or if they said the wrong thing. Like they are auditioning. They're trying to control their behavior to get acceptance from this other person. And that is a disaster waiting to happen when you date. The reason for that is this stage usually involves a lot of situationships and a lot of limerence, because when you're dating for validation instead of for genuine connection, you start to attach to people really intensely. Sometimes to people you barely know, or people that aren't even particularly nice to you, because the attachment carries the weight of the validation you're looking for. The relationship is mostly in your head, but it feels very real because there's really no evidence that this person wants to be in a relationship with you, other than like maybe they're hooking up with you or maybe they'll text you back every few days. But you have made it a relationship in your mind. The other characteristic I've noticed about stage 2 that I think is important to address here is that frequently people will get into this phase by dating casually. So they'll say that they're not looking for anything serious, or they'll say that they're outright having a little hoe phase or something, which is fine. All dating is self-exploration, including a little HP, you know? And there can be some nuance here. I want to say that. But to keep it brief, what I realize is that for a lot of people, the safest way to get from a hesitator who isn't dating at all to someone who actually goes out and meets people is to tell themselves that they just want casual. And that way, it feels like the rejection won't be so bad because it becomes about the sex or what's most convenient. Because this isn't about like forming a connection with someone. It's just about who's available, right? So it's easier to handle that rejection when you create that context around dating. And especially for people who date men, I think that sex feels easier to get. So that feels like you're mitigating the risk of being rejected because you're lowering the standard that you have, right? Like you don't need commitment. You don't even need to like the person. You just need them to say yes to sex. So it makes that leap of I'm afraid of people and I'm afraid of being rejected to, okay, let me just go try this. It makes that a little easier for people. And it's a pattern I see a lot. This progression makes a lot of sense. And this is one of the most painful stages to be in because you're dealing with a lot of rejection and you're trying to make sense of other people for maybe like the first time in your life or the first time in a while if you're coming out of a relationship and you don't really have a lot to compare it to. But if you have an insecure attachment style, you likely learned at some point that being chosen was something you had to earn, that there was a right way to be that would eventually get you the approval that you so desperately needed and wanted. So the auditioner thinks successful dating is all about presentation or hitting the right chord and making the other person like obsessed with you. Like if you just did the right thing, the right combination of stuff, it would all pan out, like you would unlock a key or something. But that's not how it works. Like that's not how dating works. That's not how forming a long-lasting, secure connection works. The way you find connection is by being clear on what you want and need in a partner and also presenting authentically when you're out and dating. And by definition, the auditioner is not able to present that authenticity because they're performing. They're performing for approval and to be chosen. Stage 3 is the seeker. And this is where it gets interesting because the seeker has done something genuinely difficult. They have gotten to know themselves. They know that they get attached a little too quickly. They know they ignore things that bother them about their date because they think they're overreacting or being too picky, or they hope that the thing that is bothering them just kind of goes away magically. They usually know their pattern pretty well and they have worked really hard to uncover them. So the self-awareness in this stage is present, but there is a gap between knowing where you tend to run into issues and then trusting yourself to deal with them as they come up and being able to regulate yourself as they freak you out. So the seeker knows what they tend to struggle with. They just are not sure whether they can trust their own judgment when they're actually in a dating scenario, but they are constantly second guessing themselves, okay? Like they have to ask their friends if they're being too picky, or like, I don't really like this guy. It's been 3 dates. Like, do I give him a 4th date? Like, I don't know what to do. And like, they're wondering if their perception of a situation is correct. They're so afraid of being wrong or being unreasonable, or what if they're missing something? And they might think people will change, or they'll think their standards aren't realistic, or they'll stay in something longer than they should because they just don't want to give up too soon. Like that's a really big fear that they have, of not giving people enough time to show them who they really are. And they're afraid of passing someone up. And what I find really interesting about stage 3 is that the self-knowledge has outpaced the self-trust. So they understand their tendencies. What they haven't built yet is the confidence to act on the red flags or the potential incompatibilities or whatever language you want to use. Like when they have a gut feeling, they don't know if they can trust it or if that's their anxiety talking. And so for this person, more self-knowledge and more awareness is not going to make a big difference. The thing that's going to help them the most is accumulating enough experience of them acting on their own reading of a situation and then surviving that experience. Like, they need the exposure of actually getting through something difficult. And once they do that enough times, they will start to believe in their own perception. And they will start to believe that they can handle what comes up for them. Like, the self-trust builds through doing, not through intellectualizing. So at this stage, they're dating more than in stage 1, and they're being much more intentional than stage 2. Like, stage 2 is characterized by a lack of awareness around your patterns. And then the seeker, stage 3, is very much aware of what's going on. Usually people get into stage 3 after like a devastating experience with someone who is not reciprocating while they were in stage 2. Like, they got really hurt by someone, usually like a limerent situation or a situationship, or they were an affair partner. They were like a mistress or something of someone who was married. And it hurt them so much that they took a step back and they're like, okay, I need to look at myself. And they start to actually dig into some of the psychology of it all. They maybe go to therapy, they read, they do all the things that you do when you're trying to figure yourself out. And they have gotten so intellectual about their experience that they start to overthink every single thing. And they just do not have that trust in themselves that they are going to make the right choice because of their past experience. And what I see a lot in this stage is they almost treat self-improvement as like a new obsession. They treat self-improvement and like becoming like the perfect version of themselves as like this healing fantasy that they have, that if they can just get it right, if they can figure out their stuff, like the perfect person is going to fall into their lap. And that is harmful in a lot of ways because it's trying to make you think that there is an end destination, very similar to what the people in like the hesitator category do, but they are still like putting themselves out there. They're trying to go on dates. They are thinking about dating quite a bit, but they're kind of more rigid and very careful about how they go about it. And when they get attached to somebody, usually they are not very good at setting boundaries. They're not very good at like making things happen deliberately. They're kind of just going with whatever goes like happens. They're a little better at being authentic than stage 2, but they're really still being a bit codependent and people pleasy. The seeker really needs to understand that they have to be vulnerable while dating, and there's no cure for vulnerability. It just has to rip the Band-Aid off and hope for the best, and you have to trust your ability to filter people early, that by the time you are being appropriately vulnerable with someone a few months into the relationship, you are actually with someone who is going to reciprocate that vulnerability and not make you feel terrible like a past experience has. Stage 4 is the self-aware dater. The self-aware dater has something the earlier stages do not. They can see their patterns as they're happening. So with stage 3, this person is retroactively thinking about all this stuff. Like, they're not thinking about their feelings in the moment. When you get to stage 4, you are able to see yourself kind of self-sabotaging in the moment. Like, if you're doing something that's not super helpful, maybe it's overanalyzing a text message. That's when I see a lot. The stage 4 dater will recognize what they're doing, which is an attempt to try to find some semblance of certainty about where they stand with this person. And they're trying to tamp down their anxiety. And in the moment, they can see themselves doing that. Or maybe another example is like when they get irritable with someone because of how someone spoke to them. They can usually recognize that they actually applied a shameful meaning to what someone said rather than taking the statement at face value, right? Like, they added suffering and they can kind of catch themselves in the moment. So that is a really important skill to develop when dating and dealing with people. And the self-aware dater has developed real self-worth, which is a significant deviation from stages 1 through 3. So while the stage 3 dater was kind of obsessed with fixing themselves, when there's no one specific in the picture, the stage 4 dater feels pretty good about themselves for the most part. Like, they're not obsessing over self-development or trying to change anything drastically in their life. The friction point for stage 4 folks is usually that when they do get into a new promising situation with someone, like they're dating someone, but they're not quite exclusive yet or something like that, it always seems to explode around like the 3-month mark to the 6-month mark. And they do the postmortem of these relationships. And usually what happens is they realize that they ignored something in the beginning that was actually an incompatibility. And then it blew up in their face a few months in when they like could no longer ignore it. Like they had to make a choice, and they usually choose to escalate things and escalate the conflict, escalate the situation. And if their partner is not able to handle that escalation, it falls apart. The other piece is that they don't always know when to stay in a relationship and when to go, because the anxiety that shows up when something feels like it has potential, that's not always a sign something's wrong. Sometimes it's just what it feels like to actually care about the outcome. And that is genuinely difficult to distinguish in the moment for the stage 4 person. So statements I hear from stage 4 folks include things like, I saw it coming and I didn't do anything. Like, why didn't I do anything? Like, there's a lot of beating themselves up about like not doing something in the moment and waiting too long. Another one is like, I knew something was off and I stayed anyway. Like, I shouldn't have done that. Like, there's a lot of blaming. Another statement could be something like, everything was fine until it suddenly wasn't, like they just changed on me. Or why does it always fall apart at the same point? Like, why is it always just crumbling after 3 months? So just like with stage 3, they don't actually need more awareness. Like, they have a lot of awareness about what's happening. And sometimes they do think they just are missing something, but it's not awareness what they're missing. What they actually need is to learn to act on incompatibilities earlier. So once they attach to someone, it makes it a lot harder to set boundaries and to be honest and to have difficult conversations because they want it to work. And it's building a little bit of space between the feeling and the response that they give, like just enough space that their own judgment sort of has a fighting chance before their anxiety makes a decision for them, because they've gotten over like asking their friends for all of the help that they could get, right? Like they're trying to handle things on their own, but they sometimes don't quite get there on their own. Another thing that I've noticed is for people at stage 4, they're not filtering their partners based on how good their partners are at repair. And a lot of the people who watch my channel, and therefore the people I work with, they have codependency issues. And when your partner has some issues with repair and you are codependent, frequently what that means is you just sort of like, it's fine, you don't have to do it, I'll do it. Right? Like you pick up the slack for your partner and you keep doing that over and over and over and over again until what? Like until you explode, right? And that is why things end at 3 to 6 months, because you can only hold your breath for so long. You can only keep accommodating your partner for so long until you lose your mind. Okay, stage 5. I promise I tell you what you were working towards. So stage 5 is what I call the secure interdependent or the integrated dater. I don't know which one I like better. Which one do you like better? I can change these names. It's my framework, whatever. So here's what it looks like. I don't want you to think that this person doesn't have feelings. Like they still care, they still have preferences, they still get disappointed, they still have to grieve relationships. The difference is they do not need another person's response to tell them how to feel about themselves. That's what you're working toward. And I want you to know that it's actually possible. It's not an abstract concept. Like people live this way. And I know it's hard for a lot of folks to believe, but dating becomes so much easier when you're not allowing another person's actions or words to make you think that you're bad or shameful. And that is what the stage 5 person is able to do. In stage 5, you're going on dates because you want to share your life with someone. You're not trying to fill a void or confirm your worth by being chosen. You're understanding that a healthy relationship is an interdependent union of two individuated adults, right? Like you will take care of your own needs and your partner will take care of their own needs. And you're not afraid to ask for assistance or help or to bring up difficult conversations when they need to happen. The stage 5 dater's sense of self is not held hostage by anyone's response to them. And that is the goal. That's what it means to earn secure attachment. So to recap, the hesitator avoids the process to protect their conclusion about themselves. They don't want to come to a bad conclusion. The auditioner enters the process but dates for validation rather than connection. The seeker has awareness around some of the stuff they were doing when they were less experienced, but they don't necessarily have the self-trust to act on it yet. The self-aware dater can see it in real time, like when they're not quite doing what they know they should be doing, but they can't always stop it. They're not great at setting boundaries, and they're not great at filtering. The secure interdependent moves through it without getting stuck at any specific area, and they really want to make sure that their partner is their own person and they are their own person. They are dating separate from how the other person is perceiving them while still maintaining a connection. You're probably not in one of these stages cleanly. Most people have one stage that feels sort of like a home base to them for a while, and then they kind of visit others depending on circumstances. A lot of the people that I work with hover between stages 3 and 4. The quiz I mentioned at the beginning is linked in the description. It takes about 5 minutes, and it measures 10 specific areas of dating, from how you filter people that you date, to what happens on the dates that you go on, to how you handle things when something is clearly off. And that quiz will tell you where specifically the friction is for you when you date, and it will also try to infer a stage of dating that you are currently in. And I genuinely think it's a very useful tool. I built it because I was so tired of content that described a problem without giving you any way to actually locate yourself within it. So I hope this is a good first step. Now that you know the different stages of dating, you should check out this custom playlist of how to date without losing your mind, because I got some really good tips in there. Please consider liking and subscribing to the channel if you got this point in the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.